Welcome to the Sharpe Way Show. I'm so happy you guys joined me this evening. I know it's a little bit late. It's usually 7 p.m. Eastern, but I pushed it back to 8 p.m. Eastern. I had to do a bunch of cool things this afternoon. Okay, they weren't that cool, but I had to do some things this afternoon, so I had to push it back a little bit. So I'm glad you guys came. As always, you know what I'm going to tell you. Why aren't you doing it? Like, comment, share. I don't see those likes popping up. Pop on there now. Please like, comment, share. Get it out there, make those algorithms rock and roll so that we can get past our media blockade, our media blackout, and we can grow this media more than ever. And if you want to help me out, you can. Head on over patreon.com/sharpeway. Give what you can give, $10, $25. If you got tons of money, give me $100 a month if you got tons of money. I hope you do. I hope you all have tons of money. Give some of it to me if you got it. If you don't, no worries. You can still help me out even without doing that. You can head over to theadvocates.org. It's free. Head on over there, support my sponsor, take that test, but more importantly, it is the world's smallest political quiz. It's like a minute. You have a minute or you wouldn't be watching me. So you can actually do it. You got a minute to do it. But most importantly, two things. Share it online. I saw a lot of you doing it on Twitter the other day. Thank you so much. I noticed it was exploding on Twitter. Thank you. Please do that again. And to all your friends who are angry about this election, they might be libertarian. Why don't you send it over to them? Send it to them, have them take it to and post it, see where they land. That's what matters. Help us out. Theadvocates.org, not .com, .org. All right, guys, we'll say thank you so much. I have today, I'm very lucky today. I have today someone from the Advocates. Yes, Advocates for Self-Government. Is that right?
The Advocates for Self-Government.
I said it right. Look at me. I'm rock and rolling. The man himself, Mike Sertic. How are you?
I'm doing well. Great to be here.
I'm happy that you're here, and I actually have a couple of questions. The number one question I have is, as libertarians, and many people who are libertarians will say this all the time. We hear it all the time. You know, all Americans, they're really libertarians. You know, they really are. They just don't know it. Is that true?
Well, it depends who you ask, but you're asking me. And so
yes, I am.
You know, there was a time that I believed the vast majority of people were libertarians. And I think as I've seen what's been going on since I kind of became a libertarian, post Ron Paul movement back in around 2009, 2010, I've definitely become a little bit more skeptical of that claim.
Okay.
One of the broadest, so a lot of polls have been conducted over the last 10 years. I know Pew Research conducted a big one. It's one of the more well-known ones. And what it really boils down to, and they tested a couple different criteria and definitions of libertarians.
Sure.
They asked people to basically self-identify whether they agreed or disagreed with certain definitions or phrases that kind of were used as a proxy to define either a broad scope of libertarians or a very short, narrow one. Okay. And so when you ask people, for instance, if they define with the phrase, do you consider yourself to be socially liberal and fiscally conservative?
Oh, we hear that one all the time. Absolutely.
Gary Johnson used that a lot back in 2016 on the campaign trail, and I think he probably got that from some of the research that had been conducted during maybe the Pew Research and others. And Cato has done similar things as well. But they found that roughly, I think, close to 50% of the population agreed with that statement. So if you use that very broad context of, is that a libertarian, then you would think that, yes, there's a lot of libertarians out there.
Well, let me walk down a couple of these comments. I got comments who popped up, right? Frank is I've talked him into donating. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate that. I love that. You all should follow Frank. Be like Frank. But no, Nano says, no, most Americans are not libertarians. And he goes on and he says, most Americans want to control their neighbors. I think he has a valid point. And I say that because, and my view is, because of our current environment, because of how we are afraid that if I don't win, if my guy doesn't win, then the other guy will enforce his will upon me. I think many people feel like Dan says, or is it Dano? I hope I'm saying it right, Dano. I'll say Dano. I hope it's Dano. That Dano says, because it's almost defensive, right? If I'm not able to control you first, then you're going to control me, and that's kind of why I want to do that. Is Dano right here, Mike, or no?
Well, it's kind of funny because I've often thought along the same lines too, and it's kind of like nuclear disarmament, right? Except that what we're doing right now is mutually assured destruction, and we've kind of seen a lot of this play out over time. Is that this kind of these polarized parties, Republicans and Democrats, left and right, are just, it seems like the way I think most libertarians can relate and sympathize with the notion that things seem to be going in a not so positive direction. Whether you supported Trump or Jorgensen, well, certainly if you supported Jorgensen, or even if you voted for Biden, I don't think anybody who calls themselves or self-identifies with the term libertarian is very happy, now that the election is behind us.
Well, but I gotta, I was just talking about this literally in a podcast earlier today that I was on. And I think that while Top of the Ticket did not do what a lot of people wanted to do, I think that's true. A lot of people wanted a whole lot more from the Top of the Ticket. It's agreed. But there's some really bright marks, right? There are some, right?
Yes.
I think you look at guys like Rainwater, who ran local first, took his licks, learned his lesson, and then ran a hell of a campaign in the end and made actual impact. Obviously, Harrington out of Arkansas, star of the show. But even guys like Shane Hazel in Georgia, who only got 2.5%, but he basically forced the runoff. So I think there is some light. Am I wrong?
No, and I don't want to sound pessimistic because I don't mean to be. I think that my pessimism is more directed towards the political establishment and the political system in general.
Got it.
Okay. I have a lot of optimism for the future of libertarianism and for the American people to embrace libertarianism more. But I think it's also incumbent upon people who are libertarians to be more effective at communicating the ideas of liberty and actually, and really not just joining this conflict machine that makes everybody worse and hate each other, and start figuring out what they can actually do within their own lives to embrace self-government within, their families, their communities, and even beyond that. And so I think that if libertarians really look at what we can do to, whether it's, voice or exit or something in between, whatever tools and practical ways that we can implement libertarianism in our own lives and show it as an example to other people, I think that's what we need to be doing. Example is
the key completely. But I want to go to the test if I can. I love the test, right? Here in New York City, whenever we go, whenever we do any type of fair or any type of street fair or anything, that we always put out our booth and we put out the world's smallest quiz, and we got the big board, and everyone who wins, we put their little, a sticker where they go. Right. And shocker, New York City, a bunch shift left. Oh, yeah, I know, we're surprised. But yes, but we actually do find libertarians. We find conservatives in New York City, but the vast majority somewhere hit left libertarian, moderate, or, much more on the progressive side, right? They usually hit that area. Clearly, it's New York City. What would you expect? You'll find some other places. But the actual test that you actually have on your website, theadvocates.org, is this, I've heard people say it's a bias towards libertarians. Is it? Be honest. Is it really biased? Is everyone, do you press a button, no matter what you do, you come up libertarian? Oh my God. I said, yes, draft. I said, yes, state everything. And I came libertarian. Is that what happens?
Yeah. Yeah, we get that claim a lot. And the short answer is no, it's not biased. And to the extent that it is, there is any bias within it, it's something that we're working to identify and remove. Because the objective of the quiz is not to misidentify people who are not libertarians as libertarians. so the backstory on the quiz is it's been around for just almost as long as the organization, the Advocates, has been around. It was developed in the mid to late 80s, based on the Nolan chart created by David Nolan, who was an MIT graduate. This was actually, so the Nolan chart was kind of founded, I think, in the 70s, and it was designed by Nolan and I think other people's influence because they were politically homeless at the time. They recognized that they weren't Republicans, they weren't Democrats, that just very different view from what most people were kind of being pigeonholed as. And there was a recognition there that there was more to political ideas and ideology than merely left and right.
Sure.
And so the world's smallest political quiz was eventually developed taking Nolan's model, with which added kind of what you could describe as personal views in terms of liberal conservative, and then adding an additional y-axis that looked at essentially persuasion versus coercion, or the use of force that one is willing to accept and tolerate vis-a-vis government and third-party agents, right? And so the Advocates has been using the quiz, and there have been several different iterations for well over 20, I guess closer to 30 years now. And we've always spent quite a bit of time, given the constraints that we have, because the product is the world's smallest political quiz.
Yeah, that's the product. You can't change that.
As we both know, I mean, you can go find political quizzes online that have 60, 70, probably 100 questions, but nobody has time for that. And so the beautiful thing about the quiz is that it's reliable, it's accurate, it's relatively, if not entirely, unbiased. And the way that we know that is because we keep very close tabs on how people are scoring when they come to the quiz. And what we're seeing is something within the vicinity or range of what Pew Research and other research polls have shown in terms of how people are libertarian. So we see month to month, typically anything within the range of around 20 to 30%. A lot of times it depends on where we're advertising and directing.
So like 20 or 30% of the people who take the test come up libertarian.
Score as libertarian within that sector. So we're not talking about people who answer 100% agree.
Right. I guess they fall into that triangle. Right. Now if I remember right, it's like about a third tend to pop up centrist. Is that about right?
Yeah, I would say a little bit more than that, closer to 35, sometimes as high as 40%. So yeah, that's usually the centrist moderate is definitely the most or the highest outcome that we see on a month-to-month basis.
There we go. So it's not, see, you guys who said it was all biased and stuff, it's not, right? See, it's actually coming up with other things besides. That's why you made all the characters, right? You made all those characters to show, each one.
Yeah, so earlier this year, the Advocates for Self-Government spent some time doing some rebranding, refocusing on our mission and really what we wanted to accomplish leading up to the election and through 2020. And we recognize, as you probably are aware, that libertarians really need to focus on how we're talking about the ideas of libertarianism, how we're reaching people, who we're reaching, and what we can do to embrace people who might like a lot of the ideas. They might appreciate the sentiment of what we're getting across, but they find certain things off-putting. I know for me, when libertarian ideas were first exposed to me and they resonated with me, it was much more of a kind of individualism, sovereignty, self-sovereignty, that kind of don't tread on me kind of mentality.
Yep, absolutely.
And that still attracts a lot of people, and that's great. But I also think that there's a huge opportunity out there to message and market libertarianism to people that those sorts of things don't resonate with. There's a lot of people out there who want a stronger libertarian community. Maybe they're a little bit more left of center. They have personal values that don't necessarily match up with the certain things that the traditional messaging of libertarianism always does. And so how can we stay principled as libertarians, promote a accurate philosophy of libertarianism while also making it more appealing to people who haven't traditionally been in our
you can start a cool podcast called The Sharpe Way. That's one way.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Let
me grab a couple of comments here. People are commenting all over the place. I don't know who Facebook user is, but hi, Facebook user. She loves what she's seen from the advocate for self-government. So far, she steers anyone that she thinks about libertarian to the quiz. There we go. Peter asks, do libertarians believe in voter ID? Yes, voter IDs exist. I'm joking. So yes, I believe in them. They absolutely do exist in the world. I'm joking. I'll tell you what I think. This is a touchy subject for many people. Voter ID is actually, for those you don't know, it is an emotional issue, not a logical issue. It really is. It's an emotional issue because back in the day, so many people of color, particularly black men, but black women also, there were many ways and reasons why they used the system to push black people away from voting. Even though someone like myself, I've never had it happen to me, my father did. And I remember the stories that being afraid of voting and things like that. Voter ID isn't a logical issue. That's why people who are full of voter ID go, it makes total sense. It isn't logical. It's an emotional issue. It feels like, and that's all it is, Peter. It feels like you're going back to the old ways of trying to keep black people from voting. So if you want to make black people particularly accept and be okay with voter ID, this goes right to what Mike was just talking about. You got to message it better. You got to message it in a way that says, no, we care about your vote. That's why we want voter ID. Otherwise, it's simply not going to work because you have an emotional issue. You have the issue of you're trying to stop me. And if you don't, you hear me say all the time, if you don't touch the emotional aspect of elections, you're going to struggle in the elections. So it's much more of an emotional issue. Can you find a way to is there an answer to find a way to have logical, smart voter ID that does not alienate minority communities? Of course we can find that answer. Of course, it's not an undoable thing. Of course we can. But when we have each side acting like the other is evil, that's when you get no solution. And what happens again is voter ID is now a wedge issue that if you're for voter ID, you're a terrible Republican. If you're against voter ID, you're a terrible Democrat. So they've used this as another wedge issue. Peter, do you tell me you can't find a way to create voter ID that will also at the same time ensure that people in minority communities and poor communities can also vote? Of course you can. We don't want to do that. We want to make it a wedge issue. So I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take your stuff away from you, Mike, but I just wanted to touch that piece. It's a piece that I hear often.
Okay.
So Andrew says, my mom is definitely considering changing parties from independence to libertarian. Yes, we're winning. Yes. My wife, Democrat, actually liked the whole fiscally conservative, socially liberal label on Gary. So did my wife. My wife was Democrat for many years, about 20, 25 years. She was Democrat. And it's Gary Johnson who pulled her over in 2016. Gary Johnson got me in 2012, got her in 2016. So now she's a registered libertarian. But I got to tell you, my wife still hates Trump. She votes Republican and Democrat and libertarian, but man, she does not like Trump. And it's nothing to do with policy. She doesn't like him. She does not like him at all. So that's just my wife. So
yeah, and on that note, real quick,
please.
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the fiscally conservative, socially liberal. I think it's very broad and very vague.
I agree.
But I don't want to take anything away from Gary Johnson because he did set record numbers. So maybe there's an argument to be made there that he actually drew in a lot of people by talking about libertarianism and himself that way. So.
Well, my issue with that, and I'm glad you brought this up. My issue is it's not really accurate for the individuals, but it's sometimes a decent explanation for the party or the movement, right? There are many individuals in the Libertarian Party who are both conservative in both liberal and both social and physically. There are many who are liberal, both physically and socially. They're both liberal, but they just don't want to enforce their view upon others.
Yeah, so, that's a really good point.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people who are socially liberal, who are libertarians, and socially conservative. It really boils down to what is the role of government?
Bingo. Yes. So if you're using it to, and when I sometimes will use that to draw somebody in, right? If people say, come on, just tell me what libertarians are. I usually say, be as liberal as you want to be, as come as you want to be, just don't force your view. Yeah. If they push me, I may say, well, the party is sometimes looked upon as being physically conservative and socially liberal, but I don't actually use that. I will say usually physically or financially responsible, and socially, I'll say tolerant. That's what I usually use that phrase instead. But yeah. I'll only say that to describe the party. The individuals are very varied within the party. So, John says, too many trust the government over private industry. Yes, I don't understand it. Government is a god that fixes all and does no bad. If you happen to see my Governor Cuomo of New York, His Majesty King Andrew II, all hail the king, he literally said, well, you can't do it. They're going to use the private sector to give out vaccines. Well, the private sector, like, who's terrible private sector people, right? Like, that's how he was talking, as if the only way it could be done is through government. But in the same way he said that, he says, Trump's going to give it to some general. What does some general know about that? I don't know. Generals literally move men, soldiers, material throughout the world every day on a mass scale. Kind of, they know everything about that.
Yeah, logistics is kind of something that might be a little bit important for generals to have some experience with.
Absolutely.
But I did catch part of your show on when you were talking about just that, and I was thinking that, man, Cuomo is, you've got it rough, but I'm in California, so we've got Newsom.
Yes.
Or as some people refer to him, Mussolini.
So, Mussolini. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Mussolini, yes. Yeah, I know. Yeah, California. So we're both kind of screwed, right? Yeah. We're both kind of screwed. Yes. You feel our pain. We feel yours. Absolutely. So, pardon Snowden. And I'm going to say something that's funny. People were asking me about should Trump pardon Snowden. And, I think if he pardoned Snowden, he would have got a huge chunk of libertarian votes. I think he would have. I wanted him to pardon Snowden, but just after the election, because I wanted to make sure Joe Jorgensen got as many votes as possible. So yes, but I hope he will pardon Snowden. I don't know if he will, but I hope he will.
Assange as well. I mean, that was another opportunity for some low-hanging fruit there to get some of those votes.
Absolutely. Yes. So Bruce doesn't want to be controlled. I'm with you, Bruce. Absolutely. Dottie says, I agree about the current environment. Many have become COVID Nazis. Sad, really. This is true. I'm sure you're having the same problem in your state with all the COVID people, right? Trying to now in New York State now in yellow zones. I think that's what he's calling it. If you have more than 10 people, even in your home, it's against the law now.
Yeah, we have something very similar. I think purple is the worst color. And my county, I'm in Placer County. We just got upgraded or downgraded. I feel like downgraded is worse. So we got downgraded to red. So I don't know exactly what that means. I'm trying to continue to operate and do the things that I need to do to not let it affect me. But yeah, it is. It's definitely crazy.
Well, I want to go now to the election now, right? The election was heavily about COVID, heavily about the things like that. Do you think, has the election shown you anything, or has post-election, has the test changed? Has anything changed after the election to make you think differently about America and where we're going?
Not particularly. I mean, we didn't see any major changes. So I guess what I'll say is we did make some changes and updates to the quiz in the months leading up to the election. We certainly saw a massive amount of traffic pretty much from the beginning of September and certainly in October and the first week of November of just swarms of people coming to take the quiz.
Well, that's because I was talking about it, Mike. That's
you were sending people our way. I'm sure when we get into the analytics, it'll be directly from Larry. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a lot I could say in terms specifically about my thoughts about libertarians. I know that there's, in terms of the breakdown, I think from what I saw, Joe Jorgensen did historically well. I think second most votes for a libertarian presidential candidate, other than Gary Johnson. So that's a positive. And then it's also no surprise that I think that a lot of people who self-identify as libertarian were more pragmatic and decided to vote for who they thought was the lesser of two evils, whoever that was.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I wasn't really happy with either of the main choices, and I don't think that too many libertarians were either. So,
okay.
But I think that there were also a lot of libertarians, at least anecdotally, the libertarians that I had talked to. And remember, my libertarian sort of origin story, if you will, kind of came out of more of the Ron Paul Republican era.
Sure.
So it's probably also just based on a lot of, my friendships and people who I know. It seemed like a number of them were more leaning towards Trump because they didn't like the Biden agenda. And it also seemed to be the case that at least you kind of had a better understanding and sense of what you were getting with Trump. He was already in office for 4 years and the world didn't burn.
Yep.
Well, I guess it depends on where you live.
Depends on what you think. Yes. No, because I live in New York City, and most of my local friends are Democrats. Most are, and many of them were just like, Trump is the end of the world. If Trump wins, then we become Nazi Germany. I mean, they really thought he was horrible, and many of them who were liberty leaning, some of them were. They were like, no. I mean, they voted for me in 2018. They were like, nope, got to vote Biden. Even though I would tell them, the state's going to go to Biden either way. Like, your 10 votes is not going to all of a sudden go, my God, Trump wins the states because of 10 votes. That's not going to happen in New York State, right? In New York State, Biden was going to get it. I still had some of my, left-leaning Democratic friends who were like, no, he's the evilest guy in the world. We have to stop him. They believed the world was burning and that if he won, we were going to become Nazi Germany overnight. And there were many who believed that. They were that obviously 70 some odd million or whatever believed that. So a lot of Americans totally believe that. I saw both sides, and many of my friends who are upstate, many of them are much more on the Republican side, and they were more like, no, Biden is communism, and we have to vote against him. I saw both sides of it, close up in many ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway was almost a kind of reaffirmation that politics tends to make us worse. There's actually Aaron Ross Powell wrote, I think it was a 2 or 3 part series over at libertarianism.org. They're very good reads. They're not too long. But he kind of goes through kind of something very similar to what my colleague Jim Babka defines as the conflict machine. That politics basically pits people against people.
Yep.
It forces us to make decisions on a binary outcome, winner takes all.
Yep.
And I've just seen so much vitriol and so many families getting torn apart. And
that's the worst part. Yes,
it is pretty insane to just how much we allow politics to basically become such an ingrained part of our identity that we hate anyone who doesn't agree with us. And to me, that's just insane. And it's just another reason why we really need to be getting back to an understanding and embracing of self-government. Because that, to me, self-government is a real, practical, actual solution that's going to make people happier and more socially harmonious.
I keep saying that, right? I want us to be happier because happy people don't want to hurt each other, right? Happy people don't want to commit violence. If you want to have a better environment, have happier people. Happier people don't want to trash things. Happier people are thinking about the future. They don't want to burn things down, right? The happier people are, the better. Look, it's not going to be perfect, obviously, but the happier your society is, the less people are going to do bad, stupid things. You're going to have a lower percentage of people doing bad things. So I completely agree. The pursuit of happiness is something we don't talk about. We talk constantly about the pursuit of safety, not about the pursuit of happiness, right? Everything's about being safe. Keep us safe. Keep us safe. Who's the guy who's going to let us go be happy and enjoy ourselves? Right? Where's that guy? I want that guy. Right? So what do? We go off to watching Netflix or Hulu or whatever is your thing, Amazon Prime or Disney Plus, whatever's your cool thing. And I guess that makes us happy vicariously through The Mandalorian. I mean, maybe that's what makes us happy. But I would rather us get out there and be happy. Let me grab a couple more comments if I could. Does Jorgensen's total mean the Libertarian Party won't be in all 50 states ballots in 2024? Generally speaking, Matt, that they aren't 100% related unless Joe would have gotten, say, like 4 or 5% like that. It just means that for some states we'll have to work harder, but it doesn't mean we will or won't be to be forward. There will be hoops we'll have to jump through in 2024 to get through to get them on every ballot. But I think we can do it. I think because one of the things that libertarians are really good at is getting on a ballot. So I think we'll handle it. But they're not. She didn't get enough to get ballot access for all the states, but for many of them, absolutely. So Dottie says socially liberal sounds commie to me. There we go. Absolutely, I love it. Libertarians by nature don't want to impose on anyone, so we're not. Yes. That's my entire point, right? We don't want to impose on others. We're going to let people be who they want to be. Yes. Tom says a lot of the libertarian ideas spreading. We just need to remind people the war on drugs lost the election. Oh, interesting. I wonder, Tom, why you think the war on drugs lost the election. I get what you're saying. I really do. And I do think a lot of libertarian ideas are spreading. I know why. Because of all the states that decided that cannabis is now legal. And didn't one state say even heroin and stuff is legal or something like that?
Oregon decriminalized possession. I think possession, if I understand it correctly.
There we go. That's what you mean, Tom. Thank you, Tom. You're right. I apologize. My head wasn't in the right spot. But yeah, you're right. The war on drugs is actually losing the election. Yes. Let's hope we end it. That would be amazing. Absolutely. Yes. My family, who has current and former members of the military, hate wars. Absolutely hate them. You know, I said often, you talked about your origin story, like you did. And I look at how I've changed since I became much more libertarian. And my push towards libertarianism actually started around 2006 or so. And it wasn't because of politics. It was actually because of business. I came to the libertarian world because of Robert Ringer. Robert Ringer, for those who don't know, is kind of an objectivist, much more of an Ayn Rander type. But he's also a business guru, and I was reading his stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. He wrote many books. He wrote Looking Out for Number One, To Be or Not to Be Intimidated, Action, Nothing Happens Till Someone Moves.
The Advocates actually just quick used to sell a number of his books on our website. So
that's how I came. It wasn't through Gary Johnson got me to the party, but the movement, it was actually through him. So that kind of pushed me towards it. But, you know, if I look at myself, you know, yesterday being Veterans Day and day before that being the Marine Corps birthday, you know, I was the kid when I was 18, 19 years old who was wearing a shirt that said, kill them all, let God sort them out. I was that guy, right? I was that kid who thought, you know, whatever, my first commander-in-chief was Ronald Reagan. So whatever Ronald Reagan said, whoever he said to go kill, those were the bad guys. Why? Because Reagan said so. That's kind of what I thought. I was that guy. And now, to Andrew's point, I'm trying my best to not have us in any wars whatsoever. I want to make as few combat veterans as I possibly can make, right? And I think really you find so many people who have been part of the military, who've actually been to war even. I'm not a combat vet, but many who are, they hate war. I mean, that's got to be one of the things you're seeing with the tests, aren't you?
And well, we don't know in terms of we just don't know as far as people's background, if they've served in the military or not. But what I do know is anecdotally, I've encountered over the years a number of veterans that were very libertarian, very anti-war. And I suppose what I can also add is that on the quiz, we have offered questions. We ask whether or not there should be a draft, and military service should be voluntary. And we do tend to get certainly more than over 50%. I think that the majority of people who respond to that agree that we should not have a draft.
There we go. So yeah, good. Rebecca says people seem to get confused about our party because the spectrum of libertarian views is so broad. Valid point, Rebecca. You're completely correct. Yes. How do we fix the confusion as a party? This is the piece that I want to bring up. The big thing that makes us different from anybody else is we just don't want to force our views on others, right? The story I tell often, Rebecca, and you might have heard me say this before. If you tell me, Larry, I am super conservative, I'm great, everything should be conservative, I go, great. Do you believe that it is the government's job to enforce your will and to force the rest of the country to be more conservative? If you go, yes, I do think that's the government's job, you're a Republican. If you go, no, it's not the government's job, it's my job, through my example, through my works, right, through my community, to convince more Americans to be more conservative. You're libertarian, right? The difference is, do you want to use force, or do you want to use your example and people go, wow, Rebecca's got it going on. I see what she's doing, and I want a part of that. And I consider it my own life, right? When I was a kid growing up in the Bronx and on Long Island, where I grew up downstate, my family was total Democrats, just absolute Democrats. Reagan was bad because he was a Republican. That was the reason. My mom couldn't have told me a policy he had, and she didn't care. He was Republican, therefore he's bad. That's how my mom thought. That's what I was like, oh, I guess is that bad? I guess so. But then when I joined the Marine Corps is a very conservative branch. All my leadership was conservative. All the people, in this case, I was on the ground side, and it was the 80s. There were only men in my leadership. We didn't have any women in the Marine Corps on the ground side at that time. Now I think we probably do now in the Marine Corps, but we didn't then. All the men who I respected and listened to and wanted to be like, they were almost all conservatives. So my entire mindset shifted more towards a conservative mindset as being 18, 19, 20, because that's who I was around. That's who I respected. That's who I saw. So I shifted more towards that. So I think the example is what makes us different, Rebecca. I think that's how we show. Mike, am I wrong here?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the big struggles for people who try to advocate libertarianism is getting people to use their imagination and recognize what people are capable of doing when you allow them the liberty and freedom to flourish. And unfortunately, what happens too is that government has created a lot of perverse incentives for decades now. And it almost seems like they actively are corroding and eroding various private and voluntary institutions that used to be the backbone of, for instance, the welfare system, or not the system, but welfare in this country. There's a whole host of other things that used to exist that over time, it's almost as if government has come in and sort of outcompeted with other people's money, taxpayers' money, and made it very difficult for voluntary charitable organizations to compete, not to mention all the regulations that government organizations impose on these private institutions. And we definitely need to see a reverse of that.
Absolutely. I say it all the time. When you add government, you by default remove community. That's just how it works. They can't coexist. They don't, right? Because government is always two things. It's a monopoly and it's a jobs program. It's always that. Whatever government program you create is always two things, a monopoly and a jobs program. So when that comes to town, how can anyone else compete? So I think when I ran for governor, and I still do this all the time, every time I create any kind of policy, the policy is to encourage, to your point, to encourage community to get back in so that government can be pulled out. If you just get government out, if you just do that, there's a massive hole. And we've been doing this for literally decades. There are some communities that has been multiple generations to where the government's been the only answer that they could ever know or understand. Some of those communities, they don't know how to help each other anymore. They've lost that institutional knowledge to being able to help. We have to somehow kind of re-engage that community spirit so they go, yeah, I got you. We got ours, right? It's almost like in the case of the Black community, I'll bring this up because I know this relatively well. In the 60s, when Malcolm X was trying to do it, the 60s Black Panther Party, not the new Black Panther Party, the 60s Black Panther Party was all about, Black empowerment, Black communities supporting each other. The government literally killed them, came in and shot them to death in their beds in California, literally killed them. Tough to grow your community when the government will literally assassinate your leadership that's trying to grow your community. Right. And of course, what filled that gap? To your point, government did. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to the point earlier where somebody said that socially liberal sounds like communism.
Yes.
And I get that, and I think a lot of libertarians feel the same way. We do tend to focus on the individual rights, individual sovereignty. Don't tread on me. And I think one of our Achilles' heel is that we don't spend enough time talking about, dare I say, community organizing.
Yes.
And because it sounds progressive, it sounds like Saul Alinsky is going to come out and start pulling some shenanigans or something. But that's really what libertarians, I think, need to be very attuned to and start spending some more time on is what can I do to start rebuilding and promoting these sort of private voluntary institutions.
Absolutely. It's the only way that we will be able to pull away, right? But there's another part that kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. I'm not a don't tread on me fan. I'm a don't tread on anyone fan, mm-hmm. right? And there's something else. I know the golden rule is do unto others, as you would want to have done upon yourself. I don't want that. I want the platinum rule, not the golden rule, the platinum rule. Do unto others as they want to be done upon. Some people don't want to be free. Some people want to be in an environment or a world where they're told what to do. I'm okay with that. Just let it be voluntary, mm-hmm. right? And if a community organizer wants to get together and people want to have that community organizer tell them what to do and they want to voluntarily follow and give him the money and do what he says, okay, good. That's your money. You've decided to do so, and you'll follow this guy or this gal. Good on you. No worries. People do it all the time. We join civic associations. We join church groups. We join all types of local groups that take our money, and we're happy with what they do with it. We say, great, take my money. I'm good with it. Your money. But we can't make more of that if, to your exact point, we don't work on that community level, right? That's the critical piece. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Pete's going to do what he always does. Pete always talks about the debt. This is like every show. I love it, Pete. I'm happy you do it, brother. I am. Every time. It is a national debt, yes. But this goes back to our other point. How in the world is government ever going to get off our back if they've got to squeeze us for $27 trillion? I don't know how it does that.
Yeah, don't ask me.
I don't know. Yes. So Sean says, I've been pushing compassion and empathy with more extreme friends to great effect. Setting a positive, calm example has been great for me. Thank you, Sean. Yes. Oh, my God. Yes. We need more and more and more of that. Yes, absolutely. It's a better example. Well, let me touch that with you, Mike. There are many ways that you could have decided to, make impact in this movement. There are many things you could have chosen to do, but you chose to join the advocates. Why?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I was in college, and I grew up in a more of a Republican household where Fox News is on every night, and it was Hannity and Combs. And
I remember Hannity and Combs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Man, I always kind of felt a little sorry for Combs because he was kind of like the lame duck there, just just going along with the show. And all of the guests were so terrible.
Beat him up. Yes.
Hannity's making fun of him and talking smack and all this, but and Combs just kind of took it. But at that time, I didn't really have, I was politically homeless. I was still forming my views. I was still trying to figure out my identity, what seemed to make sense to me, and, based on my own moral framework and upbringing. Sure. And so what I didn't really like was the lopsided one-sidedness of the conversation and tone. And even though I often at that time found myself agreeing with Hannity, mainly because of my dad did, and I think a lot of us form our political views because of our parents or family 100%. Friends. I wanted to be exposed to a broader range of ideas, and I wanted to hear the point and counterpoint as unbiased as I possibly could. And when I started to hear people, I heard Ron Paul, and then I started to get exposed to other libertarian viewpoints that seemed to be unlike anything I'd ever heard before. And they were being discussed in a moral framework that really hit home with me.
Okay.
I mean, the Enlightenment ideals and the history, the intellectual history and evolution of libertarianism became very fascinating to me too. But something about, as a human being, I don't like it when people steal from me. I don't like it when people initiate coercion against me or threaten me. And so I didn't do that to other people. And it also didn't really make sense to me on a philosophical level why it's okay for us to constantly elect politicians that we give exceptional special powers to,
Yes,
to do the very things that we disagree with.
absolutely.
And so that kind of launched me on a journey of exploration and self-discovery, really kind of based on this sort of moral foundations, if you will. And then it wasn't very long, actually, that I was put in touch with the Advocates for Self-Government, because I was at that time I was on college. I went to CSU Sacramento, and I didn't know any other libertarians beyond YouTube. And so I wanted to start to connect with other people. So I stood out in the quad on campus with the Operation Politically Homeless kit. It's got the poster like
yes, that's right. Yes.
And I started talking to people, and people actually came up and approached me. I mean, I got a lot of dirty looks from professors,
Of course.
but people were pretty receptive. And within a couple of weeks of doing that, I had like a dozen people who were showing up at the meetings called Students for Liberty. And, and it was just something that I continued. I feel like I'm constantly learning new things about libertarianism. I think it's David Bowes, somebody who probably knows more about libertarianism than just about anybody. And I remember attending a speech of his and him talking about how, he's constantly learning and he'll never be the authority on libertarianism.
Absolutely. I think you're always going to, yes, we're always going to be learning. I completely agree.
So
that's great. And so that's what brought you to the Advocates.
Yeah, and then just through a series of connections and just meeting different people and connecting with libertarians across the country, I started working as a intern here in Sacramento, and then
now you're running the whole thing. Oh my God, it's amazing!
And now in 2017, the spring of 2017, I became president of the Advocates, and now I get to see students where I was who were coming to us requesting for OPH kits to try to recruit and bring more people, expose more people to the ideas. And it's a lot of fun, and it's a great.
I love it.
I really like it when I see people kind of having that aha moment where libertarianism really starts to connect with them.
I remember when I ran for office, one of the things I loved is I would do at least 30 events every month. I was always doing events in some diner, in some place, whatever. I was always doing events. And I remember when people would come to my event with a notepad and questions. And when that happened, I was like, yes, because that person actually wants to hear something, right? If you leave your house, show up at my event, and you got a list of questions for me, you're like, okay, I'm gonna hit you hard, but I'm ready to learn something, or I'm ready to hammer you. And they would have hard questions. We go back and forth, and I got to tell you, I love the back and forth, like you were talking about, more than anything. And when you actually have the conversation, like you just talked about, not just the yelling taxation stuff at somebody. When you're actually having a conversation, it's amazing how you can really make impact, right? I tell all the time, it's about conversations, not debates. Not arguments, but conversations. I love it.
Yeah. And as a libertarian, I've learned a lot just in 10 years, but I also know how much more I have to grow in terms of messaging and communicating the ideas. I'm not always the best at it. Sometimes, just go out to some of our comments on Facebook and you'll see what I'm talking about, the vitriol and hate. And so it can be very can be very frustrating.
I got to tell you what's really horrible, right? The Libertarian Party National totally misquoted me on something, right? Just recently misquoted me on something.
Okay.
And the vitriol that came out was just horrible. I mean, just a horrible vitriol that came out. And I just looked at it like, first off, why, if you didn't like the quote, why would you be so damn mad? Why do you care? And two, why do you believe the quote? It's not like I'm not accessible. You can just text me and say, Larry, did you mean that? Larry, is that what you said? No.
It sounds like almost as bad as the mainstream media there.
Yes, absolutely. Luckily, I've been through it enough. It doesn't bother me. But yeah, all the time.
You just reminded me, actually. I don't know. I don't really spend a ton of time on social media, thank goodness. But I did see that there's a new poll that somebody on Twitter is conducting for who is the next leader of the libertarian movement. And it so happens that one of the races is between you and Corey DeAngelis.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
So, and it's neck and neck. I think you're like a couple percentage points behind, but you better get on the tweet machine and really start promoting.
Guys, if you better go ahead and go make me win that election. I'm gonna be the king of the libertarians. So do I get a crown or something? What do I get? I hope I get a crown.
I don't know what the prize is. I think it's bragging rights. Yeah.
Oh, I want a crown. Oh no. Okay, guys, let's do it. So I get a cool crown. I'll put it on. King Libertarian, big L on it or something. But then people call me a loser for L. That's not good. So it's got to be something else like an F for freedom. Oh, no, that's not going to work. F, I failed. Man, okay, we got a porcupine.
There you go.
Bingo. Guys, I want my porcupine crown. My porcupine crown. That's what I would like. So thank you for that, by the way. By the way, seriously, guys, if you want to go on Twitter, please do that. Do you know who
I forget. I apologize. I can't remember the handle of the person, but it just kind of popped up in my feed. So if you follow libertarian crowds, you'll probably
get it. All right. Yeah. Peter says we have the most technical companies in the world, but a suspect voting system. Very sad. A primitive, hidden system. We need to believe that system is trustworthy. Libertarian isn't a threat yet. Peter, another valid point you brought up earlier, right? And I will go back to the voter ID side. It's the same concept. You brought up voter IDs, and this is true also, right? The problem is, are you telling me, same thing, we couldn't have come up with a system that would have worked? Of course we could have. Look, both sides had valid questions, right? Valid concerns. Democrats had valid concerns, right? What if people have COVID? They don't want to go to the voting booth. What if they're scared they're going to get COVID or whatever? Valid concern. Absolutely valid. And the right had a valid concern. We usually don't send out 30 million ballots. At that point, it was 30 million. It wound up being 50 million. But when we first talked about it, we thought it was going to be 30 million. So we can't 30 million ballots. We've never done it before. How is that secure? Valid concern. These are both valid concerns. Are you telling me, Peter, that we couldn't have found a way to come up with a system that was secure and safe that could actually get out 50 million ballots? Is that impossible? Of course it's not. That was also a solvable problem. Tell me we couldn't get a BDO or a KPMG, that their job is to audit every penny. They couldn't have created an audit system to make sure the votes were legal. You tell me, and they're fiduciary, so if they get in trouble, literally their presidents can go to jail. We couldn't have used some combination of Amazon or UPS or FedEx or something to deliver this safely, securely with a separate system. Of course it was possible. We didn't even try to fix it. You're right, Peter. We didn't. And instead, we just got people mad and yelling and screaming. And now when people say it's voter fraud, there's actually some actual concern versus it. There should have been no concern. We could have made a plan. Democrats, Republicans could have picked the vendors together or sat in the same room or come up with a way to have a paper trail or a non-paper trail. There were so many things we could have done with none of it. And now we have the problem now. I'm sorry. I had to preach for a second, Mike. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. That's all right. I liked it.
Love you, Larry. I love you too, Bruce. Thank you. There's a lot of arguing in the ranks and people testing each other as to who's a true libertarian. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
That's nothing new.
Yes. We need unity. I agree. Basically, believing in your people more than government is the best outline I can say to them. Well, you know, the issue I'll say, Chad, is you're right. And I would like us to simply, even if you think that I'm not a real libertarian or you're not a real libertarian, I'd like us to realize that people don't come to us as libertarian. They come to us because they're unhappy with what is they're having now. They're looking for something new. And almost always they come with a bunch of their old baggage because they're humans. That's what people do. I never forget this. I tell a story often. Was it Queens or Manhattan? One of the two boroughs, an LP meeting. A young kid comes in, probably 19 years old, give or take in that area. And he comes, he's like, hey, I'm interested in libertarianism, whatever. Hey, you guys don't want to get rid of NASA, do you? And boy, did we beat the crap out of him. And I just didn't. Why? I was watching, like, what? I was new. This is probably 2012, 2013. I was new to the whole party. I was just watching as we ate him alive. And SpaceX is the right answer, and it takes my money. And I was like, what are you doing? Can't we just go, you know what, NASA? Let's make that last on our list. Let's move on to war on drugs now. We'll do it NASA like later. NASA, I mean, for those of you who are going to tell me how bad NASA is, NASA's not even in my top 5 list of things. Not even top 10. There are so many issues to deal with. We'll deal with NASA way at the bottom. Let's fix all these other issues. I don't know, like Pete's talking about a $27 trillion debt. Let's fix those issues. And then while we're fixing those, we'll do it NASA then.
Yeah, I think NASA's contribution to that debt is probably pretty marginal relative to some of the other bigger issues.
Yeah, and we'll deal with them. It's fine. I think the right answer in that case is, I'm glad you like NASA. How do you feel about the war on drugs? That would have been wonderful. How do you feel about the war on terror? How about that? Let's discuss where you are right now and how we can agree, and we'll just forget about NASA for now. But I see that all the time. It just drives me totally crazy. So anyway, let me just see if I can keep grabbing. Met Gary and Bill in Boston Common, highlight of my life. Oh, look at that. Isn't that awesome? I love that. Yes. Good. As I've said before, I've been a Democrat, a Republican, and independents. All 3 parties suck. No unity, more division, no transparency or accountability. Andrew, you hit the last 2 on the nose. Transparency and accountability. My God, we are the only party that even talks about that even brings this stuff up. It is crazy how bad that is. It's crazy. Well, my wife and I were registered Republicans and changed our party affiliation to Libertarian this month. Mike, we're winning.
Hey, that's great.
We're winning. I like it. Slowly but surely, we're winning. Yes. Logan says, I live in liberal provinces, Canada, so saying conservative can be a trigger word here. Thanks for your comment. Yes. Logan, yes. That was my worry. In 2016, I was asking Gary Johnson to not say fiscally conservative, but to say fiscally responsible. Because I do think it can trigger people, particularly in New York City, right? He went on Stephen Colbert, and I was with him when he went on Colbert. And so I was talking about, don't say conservative, say responsible. Colbert obviously is a left-leaning show, right? So I was like, you know what? Say responsible. You say conservative, and they're going to throw like bananas at you or something. So don't do that, right? So I think your point's a valid one. The words matter. Absolutely.
So you think a phrase like fiscally responsible, socially tolerant is going to be more effective if you're going to use something like that? Absolutely.
Yes, it's better. But tolerant recently has taken a bit of a hit, right? Because of the intolerance piece. So it's recently taken a hit. But this is 2016 when I first brought up 2018. That the tolerance was good. Some people say socially accepting, but that's not really accurate. We don't really accept, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to accept. You just have to not bother the person, right? Yeah. So tolerant actually is the word, but I'm not sure if in today's world tolerance will work. I would prefer physically responsible, socially tolerant. I think it's a better combination of words.
Yeah, we kind of talk about human respect.
Oh, yes.
And not necessarily, not respect in the sense that you admire somebody.
Mutual respect.
In terms of that you let people, sort of live and let live.
Yes.
You don't impose your values on me. I don't impose my values on you. We can agree to disagree and let each other do our thing.
There's a story I tell often about the Second Amendment. Some people say, Larry, do you consider yourself pro-gun? And I say, I'm not necessarily pro-gun. I'm pro-Second Amendment 100%. 100% pro-Second Amendment. And they go, what do you mean? I said, it says arms. It doesn't say guns. We've decided guns. But if you want to defend yourself with nunchucks, good luck, man. I hope you can Bruce Lee somebody away. Good for you. I don't really mind. Whatever is your thing, right? It's arms. It's how you should be able to defend yourself as you see fit. And the story I tell is there was a teacher I used to work with years ago. She was a total and absolute pacifist. I mean, to the nth degree, like Gandhi pacifist. Mm-hmm. And she said, I would never kill anybody. And I would never carry a gun no matter what. And of course, someone in the group, well, what if you were about to get raped? Of course, someone said that. And so she said, I've been there before. She said, I was in a position when that was going to happen. And even then, I didn't want to kill the man. I talked my way out of it. I would rather talk my way out of it. And her words were, and if I couldn't talk my way out of it, I would rather let it happen than kill someone. And so everyone's like, wow. So I asked her, I said, would you stop a woman, another woman, not you, another woman, from making a different choice, from having a gun? She said, no. We're good. Yeah. She's living her truth and her values the way she wants, but she's not forcing some other woman who says, no, I'm going to put a bullet in the guy. And that's her, right? And if we had more people who were like that, we'd have a better country, who would say, I'm prepared to pay the price for my values, whatever that is, but I'm not going to enforce that on you. Right. You just respect me and I'll respect you. And that's why I say I'm pro 2A. But if you don't want to have a gun, don't have a gun. I don't care.
I mean, the reality is that in the long run, you're going to have much more success persuading people about a particular set of values or concept that you hold that's really important to you than you will if you're imposing it through legislation or through coercion or something like that. You're only going to breed more resentment and hostility, and eventually there will be a backlash.
Absolutely, 100%. And the thing is, that woman gained my respect. And I tell that story sometimes to people who love guns, right? And as soon as I say it, they start getting upset, like, oh, she let some guy rape her. Like, they start getting upset. You can see it, and they're like, edgy. And then I ask that question, would you stop someone else? She goes, no, of course not. Mm-hmm. And then you see him just go, huh. It's almost like I told the story with a twist on it, right? Like it's like that's what happened. But then when I tell that story, even the most aggressive gun guys go, oh, okay, fine. Yeah. Fine. You do you. That's how they are. You do you. It's fine. Whatever you want. Just don't stop me. And there are a lot of women I know who would absolutely put a bullet in somebody. Who wouldn't think twice. They would absolutely put a bullet in somebody. And she's not mad at them for that decision. She just says she wouldn't do it. Yeah. She can't live with herself, and she would take the consequences for her values. You know what? All good. I don't mind at all. So Ross says, I like Larry Sharpe. Nice guy indeed and sincere. Thank you, Ross. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
I like him too, Russ.
You see that? Some people do. Every once in a while, I get some people who like me. That's good. All my liberal friends believe he's a devil incarnate. I can't afford Trump that much competency and remotely to be true. I'm with you, Sean. A lot of my liberal friends really hate Trump. And I think the election showed that, right? The election didn't crush Republicans. In fact, Republicans did better than everyone thought, right? So it really wasn't that. It was, they don't like Trump. It was that. If you ask most liberals, what do they not like? Most of it you'll hear is rhetoric. And my Republican friends, I have Republican friends in New York City also. Obviously, Republicans in New York City are not hardcore. They're much more moderate Republicans. But they always tell me the same thing. I wish he stopped tweeting. Why doesn't someone take his phone? I mean, I used to hear that all the time. And I think many of them just didn't like him. It was the emotional side of politics. That's what it was. It was the emotional side of politics. People just didn't like him because they thought he was mean or nasty or whatever the case may be. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think libertarians tend to pride ourselves on being rational and more objective than most people. I think that tends to be true in my experience. But yeah, I mean, you look at historically, some of the psychological studies that have been done on the reasons for why people vote for who they do. And a lot of it, even if it's unconscious, it's because they're taller, they're more attractive. I mean, there's a lot of different things that go into why people make the choices that they do.
Absolutely. So the Facebook user, your name's not popping up. Reagan was my first commander-in-chief too. You felt exactly the same. I did too, right? Absolutely. I think we were young, and that's what we thought. We felt the same way. That was the right thing. But the one thing I'll talk about, Bruce brings up, free thinking's the path. Yes, Bruce, but I'm just being full with you. It's sometimes hard. When I look back at my time as a Marine, life was easier. Everything was black and white, right? Those guys were the bad guys. I was part of the good guys. Who has to have nuance, right? Who needs to think? I know who the good guy and the bad guy is, and life just becomes a whole lot easier. So I do think that while you're right, Bruce, it's also more challenging, right? The price for freedom is responsibility and respect, right? You have to have responsibility and respect. Otherwise, freedom doesn't last. Just doesn't. Because if you don't have respect for the other, you'll begin to impose your will, or they'll impose their will upon you. If you don't have responsibility for your actions, then you're going to start hurting people, or you're going to want to be independent. So I think you have to have both. And that's not always easy. It can be very challenging.
Yeah, and you kind of just, I think it was Bruce just made me think about the founder of the Advocates for Self-Government was a man named Marshall Fritz. And after he founded the Advocates, he later went on to also start up a group called the Alliance for the Separation of School and State. And I think they're now defunct, or Marshall has since passed on. But I believe that he was of the mind that, in order to facilitate more free thinking and autonomy and eventually get people to think more for themselves as libertarians, is that we really need to focus on the education system and how we're educating young people. And John Taylor Gatto, the Dumbing Down of the American Mind or something like that was another book. Really it's, I think, somewhat of an indictment of a lot of our schools that we don't have as many free thinking or critical thinking people. Because I think if we did, we would probably see even more people embrace libertarian ideas. We would see more people scoring as libertarian on the world's smallest political quiz.
It's not on the test, right? The test is all about math and English, and critical thinking isn't on that test, and that's all about federal funds, and that's what it's about. Yes. Paul says, don't tread on us. Yes, thank you, Paul. Absolutely. Chad says, I like voluntary socialism. No, like voluntary socialism, have at it. Don't force me. I'm with you, brother. I'm with you. Do you. Just don't make me do you. Does that make sense? Yeah, there we go. Can't do anything with the debt until we get rid of the Fed. Yeah, you're not going to find me arguing that one. I mean, it's difficult. Absolutely. We got to start working on the Fed. But the Fed, in my view, is a big education piece. It just is. I mean, it really is a big education piece. Too many people have no idea what it's even about. Absolutely. Well, I want to make sure, if you want more information on Mike, heading over to Facebook, head over to @selfgov, get more info on him and, of course, the Advocates. If you want to take the test we've been talking about, you can. Head over to theadvocates.org, take that test, and do me a favor. Support me by doing that. Head over there, take that test, post it online, and send it to your friends. Say, hey, why don't you see how libertarian you are, if you even are, and go ahead and take that test and have them take it too. And, of course, if you got some cash, send it my way. I'm always happy to take some cash. This takes time, money, and energy out of what I do. I got to pay my crew and my team to help out. Absolutely. And lastly, though, someone on Twitter has some kind of poll or something where I can become king of libertarians. So I want my porcupine crown. So head on over there. Do that if you don't mind. Vote me. I appreciate it. It's really awesome. Guys, I want to say thank you so much for watching tonight, for paying attention, and for all the comments. I appreciate it. Mike, thank you so much for coming. Anything you want to say before we wrap this up?
No, just one last thing. We also do offer Operation Politically Homeless Kids. So if you're somebody who's interested and you are like me and you want to reach out and put yourself out there and recruit more libertarians, whether it's for your Libertarian Party affiliate group, or maybe you're a student on campus or wherever, you can also find materials and resources to help your activism out at our website at theadvocates.org.
There we go. We can head on over there and do that. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you all so much tonight. Mike, thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Larry.
Have a good one, guys. I will see you all tomorrow.